Vaccine hesitancy continues to be a challenge in South Africa's vaccination drive, and government has come under scrutiny for possibly not communicating effectively to the public about the shots. With those 18 and above now eligible to receive a vaccine from today, how should government be positioning its communication strategy around COVID-19 and the shots themselves to avert a sharp fourth wave of infections and, of course, address the issue of hesitancy? Vick is chairperson of the CommsSA Afrika group and joins us now to talk more about this. Chris, always great to have you on. Welcome to Newsfeed PM. How much do you think of the decline in the number of people in the last few weeks who've turned up at vaccination sites has to do with poor comms from government?
It's certainly a factor, but we can't rule out the fact that there have been some logistical problems with vaccinations around people not getting their SMSs or not getting onto the electronic registration system adequately. But the reality is we can't over-communicate on COVID-19, particularly around vaccinations. A lot of the work that we're doing at COVID Comms at the moment is to deal with the misinformation around vaccines, which certainly is fueling some of the hesitancy. But there are also these little anecdotes that people share without thinking, anecdotes of people dying from the vaccine, which have been proven to be completely untrue, anecdotes around some of the side effects. I think what we really need to focus on, and what COVID Comms is focusing on in the new fourth wave campaign we launched today, is addressing vaccine hesitancy head on by providing facts about how safe it is, firstly, and secondly, how effective it is. If you look at countries like the US, people who contract COVID, if they've been vaccinated, 99% of them survive. You know, people who don't have vaccinations often die. We need to present people with those facts and challenge the misinformation, not just from people who are hesitant, but people who are resistant, because I think they are the biggest challenge at the moment.
And that's the thing, because often when we analyze the drop in numbers, it's all lumped in one category. People say these are the so-called anti-vaxxers, whereas a lot of people simply say they don't know enough and not enough has been explained. Is government getting that distinction right?
I think it's getting better. There's certainly a lot more collaboration between government communicators, the private sector, labor and civil society. There's coordination around messaging, etc. But I know government doesn't have the budget. I mean, some of it was stolen by the digital vibes people. The reality is that government hasn't funded sufficiently government communications campaigns. So there's a money issue. There's also the fact that too much government communication is still taking place in English, not in multiple languages, which is where COVID Comms is trying to fill the gap. And a lot of the language is also still quite scientific or medical. What's been interesting, though, is around the 18 to 35-year-old cohort, we're seeing a bit more imagination in the communication work that's being done. It certainly resonates with that age group more than some of the previous communication that we've seen. But we're dealing with an entity, the state, which is struggling with money, struggling with messaging, and struggling with reach.
Let's talk about your role then, because on the back of digital vibes, I think we're all looking at things with a degree of suspicion. Where are the parameters for the work that you do in relation to what government is doing?
Well, we have, as I say, a good working relationship with government. We have a weekly meeting. There's a thing called the National Communications Platform, where we all put our heads together. We look at what's coming out of the research, what's fueling hesitancy and resistance, and we develop solutions. But the civil society organizations within that grouping operate independently. We don't get any funding from government. We've received a small amount. I think it's about 2% of what Digital Vibes receive from government is what we've received from the Solidarity Fund. We have a very clear set of objectives, and we account for the money that we do spend. All of it goes to young communications practitioners, filmmakers, animators, designers to produce information material, which we make available free of charge. You right now could go onto our website, which is covidcoms.org.za, and you can download any number of infographics which you could share on your family or neighborhood WhatsApp group. You can download animated videos, which you can also share. Newzroom Afrika could take all our material and broadcast it as and when it likes. We are purely non-for-profit. We're doing this because we believe we need all hands on deck and that a national effort is needed, particularly around communication. We can't do anything about the logistics or the rollout program itself, but we can certainly do whatever we can to get the messaging out there. And our core principles, plain language, so no science, multiple language, all 11 South African languages, and easy to move, which means you can download and WhatsApp it without using a month's worth of data.
And I'd imagine, Chris, there's also, to a degree, because South African community is so complex and different, even based province per province in some situations, that there perhaps needs to be a difference in approach moving from one area to the next in some instances.
Well, it's certainly getting more segmented. The proposal that we're agreeing on now is to target 10 districts where there are particularly low vaccine figures. To target those districts to do workshops, we're going to be producing what we call a vaccine toolkit, which community leaders can use to build awareness and deal with hesitancy. The plan is that a roving vaccine station then arrives in that community within a week from then, so that we sensitize people, build understanding, and make sure that there's availability and access to vaccines. And then what we want to do after that is document, create vaccine diaries of people who've been vaccinated. And that's a national initiative across the country, working in different languages, different kinds of communities, different class formations, different employment situations. So a much more segmented approach. The difficulty is it's a huge project in itself, logistically, but increasingly the collaboration between civil society groups like ours, government in terms of communication and understanding when the vaccines are going to be available should hopefully make for a more segmented approach, more targeted, with better results. Because there are some areas where there's only been a 6% vaccination rate. We have to prioritize those areas. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the ones that Minister Parkla is talking about, where there's been a significant increase in COVID-19. So it's about getting more targeted with the messaging, different languages, plain languages, and linking it to access so that people are able to get vaccinated very soon after they've been exposed to new information about COVID-19 and the vaccine itself.
Is there any telling, finally, how much public distrust of the government is impacting the reception to the messaging around COVID-19 and the vaccination?
Well, there's no doubt that there's a trust deficit. I mean, we are sometimes approached by corporates who say we want to work with you, but we want to know that you're not working with government. We don't want any co-branding from government on whatever we produce, which is concerning, right? But I mean, it's an indicator, I think, of the fact that there are some constituencies, some people in South Africa who don't entirely trust the government on anything. And in the midst of that, for a government with a trust deficit that large to try and communicate, and when there are significant holdups in vaccine rollout, which compound the feeling that government can't get it right, it is a difficult environment to work in. And that trust deficit, I think, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic has been the biggest challenge. So what we're trying to do is develop trust in the vaccine and trust in the messaging as a civil society initiative working with others. Government is doing its own work. It is having an impact in some communities, but I think you'll find that the impact is less where there is not, where there is a trust deficit. Because in a sense, we have to build what we call circles of confidence. So if you don't trust government, maybe you trust your local preacher or even a taxi association or a teacher or a school principal. We need to enable people who can build those circles of confidence to play those roles within the community so that even if there is a trust deficit in the state, there's still trust and confidence in other people who can drive the messaging.
Chris Vick, Chairperson of COVID Comms South Africa. Great to speak to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.